Hey friends, Rick Morton from the Crimson Chronicles Podcast. If you're like me, you grew up watching the Bear Bryant Show, and you've enjoyed the episode that we put out this week about the last season of the Bear Bryant Show. The good news is there's a ton more that ended up on the cutting room floor that wasn't able to be included in that episode. We want to share that content with you over the next couple of weeks. And we're releasing today a bonus episode. It's our interview with Steadman Shealy, about 20 or 25 minutes of time with us talking with Steadman about his time during 1982 as Coach Bryant's co-host on the Bear Bryant Show. And so we hope you enjoy this. Don't forget to like, to rate, to review, to subscribe to the Crimson Chronicles Podcast on YouTube. We appreciate your support of those that support us, both Yay Alabama, the NIL collective of the Crimson Tide. Check that out at yay-alabama.com. And also over at whitwillsports.com, whitwillsports.com, you can use the code TWO to get a discount on your very own title towel, which is the rally towel of the Crimson Tide. And so without further ado, check out the interview that Tommy and I did just a few days ago with Steadman Shealy about his co-hosting of the Bear Bryant Show in 1982.
Steadman Shealy led Alabama to a national title in 1979 as the Wishbone quarterback and was a graduate assistant for the 80, 81, and 82 and 83 seasons. And during the 82 season, had the honor of being Coach Bryant's co-host for the Bear Bryant Show.
All right, so Steadman, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that you are the record-breaking guest that we've had on the Crimson Chronicles podcast. And so your episode that we did with you about your career has really shattered all of our records, and we're excited to have you back. But I want to jump off right there. So as a GA, you were charged with being the guy who had the headset on, and you were right there next to Coach Bryant, right?
I was. I probably had the most powerful non-paying job in America. I was Coach Bryant's eyes and ears.
And then you went from being his eyes and ears to being his co-host and sitting beside him in 1982. How did it come about that you became the co-host for the Bear Bryant Show?
Coach Bryant just asked me would I be interested in doing that. And then I said, yeah, I was a 24-year-old kid. I was like, yes, sir, Coach. Kind of like anything you ever have. Yes, sir, Coach.
Right.
So I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it was great. It was just a wonderful experience, and it enabled me to get closer to Coach Bryant, and it was just so many crazy memories that year held. We would film it every Sunday morning, and so I'd get up and drive to Birmingham, and then I'd have to walk for about 30 minutes in the hall to calm myself down. Not sure I wasn't very good, but with Coach Bryant, he runs the show anyway. All I did is facilitate a little bit. And the funny part would be is when he'd start coaching me on the show. But it was a great time.
Well, he had to coach somebody, right? Like that was part of the deal. So I'm curious about that because I think back as a kid, especially during those years of watching the show, and Coach Bryant was he was calm, he was thoughtful. You might even say that he was grandfatherly in the way that he approached his demeanor on the show. Was that the same man that you came to know on the sideline and in practice?
No.
Well, tell us about that.
It's pretty quick. Coach Bryant could be very intense. And there were instances during my really 7 years with him that he could make a very strong statement. But just his presence made a statement. It was just amazing how, everybody, this is what people don't realize. You spent, your neck hurt at the end of practice because you're always looking up in the tower to see if he was watching. And then every now and then he'd get on his bullhorn and say, Steadman, I want you to do so-and-so, or whoever else. And then when he came out of the tower, though, is when everybody started shaking because you didn't know what he was going to do. Oh, and I've seen him kick all Americans into to get them rolling, and because he didn't feel like they were putting out. I've seen him kick all Americans off the team. And we were all just like shaking. I've seen him go out there, and I won't mention names, and make a guy run the ball again, run the ball, and just get killed to make a statement. And it was hard-nosed football when you played for Coach Bryant, but it was worth it. Everybody that ever played for him, you loved him, but yet you feared him so much. And that's why it was so neat for me to coach with him and then be his eyes and ears on the sideline. And that'd be so many, could make some comments. And I know there was one picture that went all over everywhere. It was caught by a photographer where we were laughing right in the middle of the game because Coach Bryant say something, and it was typical Coach Bryant. And he didn't spend a lot of time arguing with officials or things like that, but his real power was he did all of the substitute. He controlled that, and nobody went in the game unless Coach Bryant said they were going in. You didn't play unless he put you in there. And he had a way of doing it. He'd tell Jack Rutledge for the offense or Jeff Rousey for the defense. And I've seen him fire coaches on the sideline. I've seen him go out there and jump on the coach and say, "Look at your great All-American. He's getting knocked on as you know what." And he hadn't done nothing. And, everybody, and it feels, but yet you can say when things are going well. And I've always said when Coach Bryant did most of his coaching is when we were up big and all. He really got into it then. I feel like he felt more comfortable. And if things weren't going right, he could. And then everybody always talks about Coach Bryant's halftime speeches, which were amazing. We were playing USC. They were number one, and we were out there, and they were supposed to beat us, and we were down 3-0 at half, and Coach Bryant walked into the locker room. We just knew we were going to get blasted, and here's all he said. He said, "Guys, we got them right where we want them." Mm-hmm. And that's all it took. We went out and won 6-3 and won the game. It wasn't a high-powered show, but it was a knockdown, drag-out ball game. But you just never. And then I've seen him come in there, and we'd be up 21-0 or something like that, and he'd chew on us like, "Lord," all this stuff.
Steadman, back to the show. You mentioned that you went up there on Sunday morning, but you had been all week long in preparation for a particular game as a graduate assistant. You had experienced the game from the sidelines. You had been in the locker room after the game. You had to have been thinking all night long about what am I going to say and how am I going to treat this particular Bear Bryant Show episode. Tell us how a typical Sunday taping went. You got up there at what time? I think you taped at 11 in the morning or something like that. But what do you remember about the actual day?
The exact time. I just remember I was always there at 9:00.
Okay.
And it took me about 30 minutes to calm down, to be honest about it. And then we would go in there and we would set up on the set. And Coach Bryant would just stop. You just tried to facilitate what went on because he pretty much just took charge of the show. And I would talk about the sponsors, and I would say, "Coach and Golden Plate, we want to thank you and for being our sponsors." And then we'd start watching the film. Because see, back then, you could only be on TV 5 times over 2 years. So if you're on 3 1 year, you could only be on 2. So everybody watched Coach Bryant's show because it allowed you to watch the game. And it was just incredible how he would go to say stuff and talk about the mamas and papas and your Sunday school teacher and your teachers and principals and your coaches. And nobody could do it like Coach Bryant. And then he had all these little phrases like, "Bingo, that's a goodie." He would, a big hit. He just loved that. And if somebody didn't, I remember one time somebody wasn't carrying the ball right. And he said, "Steadman, this is how you got to carry the ball. And we got to do a better job of making sure we do that." And you just never knew what was going to transpire during the show. And then at the end of the show, they would always go, they'd have their hands, they'd go 10. they'd count it down till hey, the show was going to end, and Coach Bryant would just keep on talking. And so what I'd do is I'd say, "From Coke and Golden Flake, we'll see you next week." And so that's how it was really ended up being a lot of fun. And then once I got over, okay, am I doing this right or whatever? Because I've never done anything like this. But the people we work with were great. They'd every now and then get on me if I maybe ended the show a little early or didn't follow the cues. And I probably wasn't all that great doing the show, but I had a blast, and Coach Bryant seemed happy with it. So if he was happy, that's all I cared about.
Well, I mean, after all, they weren't going to get on Coach Bryant, right? Like they had to get on somebody, and they certainly weren't going to get on him.
Exactly.
Well, Steadman, you had some huge shoes to fill because Charlie Thornton had been the host for so long. And I actually visited the set in October of 1977 and did a full-page story on the show for the Crimson White the year I was sports editor, and had a great time, took some great pictures. I actually saw them today. But is there something, I know Charlie Thornton used to tell some hilarious stories, and I wrote about them, about the tricks they would play on him and some of the things that Coach Bryant said or did. But do you remember any particular episode or moment that stands out in your memory? Something maybe funny or down home human interest, or something that only you, Coach Bryant, could have said or done?
The story I remember, it didn't happen while I was there, but the story they always talked about was during the show, Coach Bryant took the Coke and poured it in the trash can. And everybody's, why is Coach Bryant doing that? What happened? Somehow the trash can, maybe he was smoking those Campbells, and somehow and next thing you know, the trash can was on fire. And Coach Bryant didn't miss a beat, just poured the Coke on there and just went back to doing the show. And
kept going.
The story I just always will remember because it was that's classic Coach Bryant. Never missed a beat. But everybody wanted to know, why was he pouring out his Coke? And he was putting out a fire. That was right between Charlie and Coach Bryant. That's, I think, the story that I remember the most. And then I guess probably one of the saddest days in a way, besides when Coach Bryant passed, was when he walked in after the Southern Miss game. And he goes, "Steadman, I'm going to retire." He said to let Reggie Collier beat us running the ball and lose him. And that was it. Then of course, I had to regroup and rethink, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And we did the show like nothing, but that was something.
Steadman, you talked about that he would coach you up a little bit. One of the things we saw in later years with Coach Saban is he would use press conferences and other opportunities to be able to make statements to players and to coach players up by using his media presence. Were there any things that you saw where Coach Bryant was still coaching, he was coaching the audience, but he might have been speaking to players at the same time and been making a little bit of a point?
He was a master at making a point. And I firmly believe he did that to make a point. And he would just use me to help facilitate this point. I've been on the practice field coaching, and he'd come down there and start coaching me about what he was really doing was making a point to the guys I was working. Coach Bryant was the master motivator. He could really motivate you. There's no other. And there probably won't ever be. He just knew how to make his point, and you didn't ever let it happen again.
Well, I'm curious. I know for us that for those of us that were not part of the program, that didn't play there, that didn't play for Coach Bryant, it was appointment television for us to watch the show. When you were a player, did you guys watch the show?
Absolutely not. Listen, you got to remember, it was 6.5 days a week job we had. We didn't have any 20-hour week or anything like that. And you had to go to school too. And the reason being is once we watched the film and got critiqued and graded, whether you graded a winner or you didn't, if you didn't grade a winner, you didn't get to eat the training table. And I tell people all the time, the game I broke and still hold the record, all-time rushing record, I didn't grade a winner.
Wow.
And I didn't eat training table that week. I would make a 35-yard run and get a minus because I was using Steve Whitman, my fullback, and then breaking off him, using him to graze the linebacker and just shooting through and then pick up 35 yards and minus. But that was Alabama. That's what was great about Coach Moore, Alabama. They wanted perfection and And so it was just classic.
I can imagine there was a little PTSD over if you happen to see the show and you started to hear him talk about you or critique you or whatever, it might take you back to being on the practice field or hearing it somewhere else. As you were part of that final season, you said that obviously you knew when he talked about Reggie Collier and he talked about the USM game that he had told you he was going to retire. Did the other folks around you, did they understand at that point that this was really a historic season and that you were in the final stretch?
Yes. Yes, I think we all were. And I think it made it sweeter. You just appreciate it. Made me appreciate every show I did with him, made me appreciate everything was around him because, see, when I was on the sideline, right by him, the whole game, and everything that went on, and he'd turn to me and say stuff, and I'd have to be careful, and every now and then I'd say, we ought to do the hoopy panel. And I can remember one time I opened my mouth I shouldn't have. And Coach Bryant turned to Coach Moore and said, man, why ain't we doing the whoopie pass? So I had to be real careful about what I said. But the way he would substitute, everybody got to play. Mm-hmm. And so that created an environment where every week you knew you were going to play 50 or 60 people in a half, the first half now. And nobody does that. I always tell people the story, and I'll digress real quickly, that we're playing Auburn, and we fumbled 5 times in the third quarter, and next thing you know, we're down 18-17, and we'd been up 17-3, and defensively, they weren't that good. Offensively, they had Cribbs and Brooks and Trotman. They were pretty good, but starting the fourth quarter, Coach Bryant benches the first team offense. And the Jetters go in there, which is our second unit. And when I talk about units, I'm talking within those units, there are a lot of players, and they go 3 and out. And of course, next time we get back in the game, it's about 10 minutes left. We're behind. We march at 82 yards, and I was fortunate enough to score the winning touchdown and 2-point conversion. But that was the mastery of Coach Bryant. Who would do that? You think anybody would do that today? No. But he made a statement, and it worked.
Steadman, when you look at how programs handle media today, you got press conferences from head coaches, assistant coaches, you got documentaries that are out, got social media out every day. I mean, it's unbelievable. What traces, if any, of the Bear Bryant Show do you still see today?
Coach, now this is what he was good. He was real good at preparing us to handle the meeting. Mm-hmm. He would always, in his own way, guide us what we should say, which is basically nothing. Okay. Because see, anytime opposing players would say something about us, they'd put it up on the bulletin. And he would just say, hey, I don't want you saying anything that's going to give the other team an edge or whatever. And I'll never forget, this is a story. I don't know if I hadn't thought about this in years. Jeff Rutledge and I were involved in a press conference. And we mentioned something about our audibles. And the next thing you know, Jeff and I are being summoned to Coach Bryant's office. And it was not good. And believe me, we never said another word about our audible. Because most people didn't realize back then, I would call the majority of the plays. But every time we lined up, probably every other play I owned, because we never ran to the 6-man side. We always went to the weak side. That was the rule. And if you read your way out and you did it correctly, there's no way they could defend it. No way. But that's a story I'd really forgotten about in years and years, but I'll never forget that day. I was shaking so bad when I walked in his office. And then when Jeff and I both looked at each other and were like, oh my gosh, what have we done? And I don't know, I knew about it. He could, when I stepped on a pine cone right before the last game of my senior year, we're playing Arkansas, and I tweaked my knee. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was in Dothan, I was running. And of course, I think I called up, or maybe I called Coach Goosetree or something. And said, next thing I know, I'm getting a call from Coach Bryant. And believe me, I was back in Tuscaloosa before I didn't get to finish my time off, to say the least. He just always seemed to know things. And that was Coach Bryant. And even when we did getting back to the show, he knew something about everything. You'd think he's over there not saying much, but he knew something about there. And he knew the plays. He knew how you ought to tackle, how you need to be holding the ball. He could tell if we weren't being tough. He could tell if there wasn't a lot of effort. And it all come out in the show. So I didn't watch the show because I didn't want to see if I misread. I was one of those guys that could make 9 good reads and 1 bad read, and I focused on the bad.
Right.
That was just my nature. And I didn't want to see it. Or if I missed a pass or threw an interception or fault, that was the cardinal sin. It was something.
Steadman, we appreciate you being on. It's such a powerful perspective of you being on the Coach Bryant Show. It's unbelievable. That's been 43 years ago that you were the host of that show. And all the while, you were in law school, all the while, and graduate assistant coach with coaching responsibilities. And it's really unbelievable. And we appreciate your role in the history of Alabama athletics. And thank you for sharing your heart on what went on that final season of Coach Bryant, and especially with the Bear Bryant Show. But we appreciate you being on.
Thank you.
All right.